All right. Is my phone making noise or you can't hear it?
No, it's not.
You can't hear it. That's fine. Great. So, I'm now on the fourth arc and the sixth arc. So, in terms of the fourth and the sixth arc, remember I said there's no fifth. The fourth and the sixth, I would join them together for the purposes of being innervated by the same nerve. Remember, each arc has its own cranial nerve. And the cranial nerve that innervates fourth and sixth arc structures is the vagus nerve, cranial nerve number 10. What only differs is the specific branch of the vagus. For example, structures derived from the fourth arc are innervated by superior laryngeal nerve. Superior laryngeal nerve in your gross anatomy, it's what will give us external laryngeal and internal laryngeal. Internal laryngeal would be sensory to the mucous membrane of the larynx above the vocal cords. Then external laryngeal is what innervates a muscle called cricothyroid, the odd one out amongst the muscles of the larynx. All muscles of the larynx are innervated by the recurrent laryngeal nerve, except that cricothyroid, meaning that cricothyroid muscle should come from the fourth arc. Then all the other intrinsic muscles of the larynx should come from the sixth, because the nerve of the sixth arc is the recurrent laryngeal nerve. So life is very interesting if you have facts at the end. Things get easy to remember. So you can remember things from gross, and they can help you understand your embryology. Right. Then your fourth arc gives us cricothyroid muscle. It also gives us muscles for the pharynx that we call constrictor muscles. Those constrictor muscles are 3 in number. There is superior constrictor, middle constrictor, and inferior constrictor. They're arranged like tumblers, right? So they're actually stacked on each other. I won't go into their gross. Then there's another muscle that comes from the fourth arc that we call levator veli palatini. Levator veli palatini, it's a muscle of the palate. Levator, it elevates the palate. Veli, a veil, it's I'm not so sure if there's anyone who's quite familiar with Islamic culture, but a veil is more of a what do you call those things that you cover. Most ladies will know for weddings, eh? Yeah. Right. Then sixth arc, the muscles are basically intrinsic muscles of the larynx. So things like posterior arytenoid, vocalis, there's thyroepiglotticus, thyroarytenoid, all those muscles that you've done in gross for the larynx. Then in terms of the skeletal component, the fourth and the sixth arc, they form the laryngeal cartilages. The larynx has 6 cartilages. 3 of them are paired, which is the corniculate, the cuneiform, and the arytenoid. Then 3 of them are unpaired, which is the thyroid, the cricoid, and the epiglottis. I'm very much particular when I teach larynx. Some that I love a lot because I have quite a prominent voice box ever since I was a baby. So I actually enjoy teaching the gross. I think it's one of the first things that I ever taught in my life, larynx. Then, so those are the arcs, right? Then remember I said on the outside we have clefts. So only the first cleft will form a structure. The other ones should close. So the first pharyngeal cleft, it's lined by ectoderm. And it should give rise to the external auditory meatus. So external auditory meatus is part of the external ear, and it comes from the first pharyngeal cleft. And the ectoderm in that first pharyngeal cleft, at some point, it is going to form a solid meatal plug, meaning there's no canal initially. That meatal plug should dissolve. If it doesn't dissolve, it means I'm born with an external ear that is an auricle and a solid meatus where there's no canal there. And that's a cause of conduction deafness. The plug, when you do development of the ear, it should dissolve by around 7-8 months before 7-8 months intrauterine life. That's a month before you are born. Right. Then the second arc, as you can see on this diagram, should proliferate and close the third and the fourth, like this on the second diagram here. The second arc should proliferate and close, and it comes to join something here that is not really taught. I think it's called the epicardial ridge. Epicardial ridge forms neck structures. Things that are coming from it will be innervated by mostly the accessory nerve. So you're thinking sternocleidomastoid, trapezius, but it's not really taught when people talk about development of head and neck structures because it's not a pharyngeal arc. Epi means above, cardial means the developing heart is just below. So what do you think will happen if I don't close the third and the fourth, the second, the third, and the fourth cleft? What do you think will happen? An example is there. That baby there. Guys, what do you think will happen if I don't close the second, the third, and the fourth arcs? Judging from the fact that you can see that the meatus is outside, coming from the first cleft. So what do you think will happen if I don't close the second, the third, and the fourth? Don't you think I'll have a fistula? A fistula is an abnormal communication between two epithelial surfaces. In this case, epithelium of the skin and epithelium of the inside. I'll have an opening on my neck, linking to the outside. Usually, those openings are in front of the sternocleidomastoid. We call them branchial fistulas. Right. In other cases, they can just be cysts on the inside without opening on the outside. Right. Then we have pharyngeal pouches. Pharyngeal pouches, they're also the easiest. Does anyone know the structure of a bottle? Probably one of you was taking a fizzy drink today. Ish, forgive my artistic nature, but I think I'm good. That's the structure of a bottle, eh? Right. That is what happens to the first pharyngeal pouch. It forms something that we call a tubotympanic recess. And this tubotympanic recess has two parts, a dilated part and a narrow part. The dilated part, and remember, these pouches are endodem. Eh? The dilated part is what gives rise to the middle ear. Middle ear, I can also call it the tympanum or the tympanic cavity. Then the narrow part there, I need to think again in gross. What really connects to the middle ear? And the only thing that I can remember is the auditory tube. Auditory tube exits the middle ear from its anterior wall to communicate the middle ear to the pharynx. Right. So the narrow part will form the auditory tube. And if I want to make life easy for me, I'll also remember that endodem will form the GI tract, and the pharynx is part of the GI tract. That is why the auditory tube will then join the middle ear to the pharynx. They're all coming from the same germ layer, which is endodem. My converted, are we together?
Yeah, we're still together.
We're still together. Great. Gam, are you saying something? Great. So remember I said between the pouch and the cleft, there is pharyngeal membranes. So just like how I said, only the first cleft will form something. Only the first pharyngeal membrane will form something. The other pharyngeal membranes, yada yada, they will disappear. So the first pharyngeal membrane gives rise to the tympanic membrane. So this needs to make sense. Tympanic membrane from gross, it separates the external auditory meatus from the middle ear. Now we are saying the first pharyngeal membrane that separates the first cleft, which gives my external auditory meatus, from the first pouch, which gives my middle ear, is going to form the tympanic membrane. Are you seeing the sense?
No.
First pharyngeal membrane separates first cleft from first pouch. And I'm saying that first pharyngeal membrane will form the tympanic membrane. In gross anatomy, the tympanic membrane separates the external auditory meatus from the middle ear. So if I come here, first pharyngeal membrane, on the outside there's first cleft, which forms external auditory meatus. On the inside there's first pharyngeal pouch, which forms the middle ear. So it's like I have pouch, I have membrane, I have cleft. What these things are forming: middle ear, tympanic membrane, then external auditory meatus. It's just the same as in gross. That's what I'm trying to put across. Do you not get it? I struggle pronouncing your name. Setsa.
Yes, I do get it.
You now
It's okay.
get it. Great.
Yes.
Then the second pouch Don't really worry much about it, but it gives us the palatine tonsils and the tonsillar fossa. One who asked me, what's the tonsillar fossa? Where do I find my palatine tonsils in gross anatomy?
In the oral cavity.
There are no tonsils in the oral cavity. So
I want to try. I think the anterior and the posterior palatopharyngeal arcs between the.
so they lie between palatoglossal arc anteriorly and palatopharyngeal arc posteriorly in what we call the tonsillar fossa. So no tonsils are in the oral cavity. The lingual tonsils are on the posterior third of the tongue, and posterior third of the tongue is now in the oropharynx. Only the anterior 2/3 of the tongue lies in the oral cavity. Okay. Then third and fourth pouch, I do them side by side. So they each they each divide into a ventral part and a dorsal part. And the easiest way is to look at the dorsal parts for both. Then I look at the ventral parts for both, or either way. So the dorsal parts will form the parathyroid glands. Right. So which pouch do you think will form the superior parathyroids, the third or the fourth?
I think it's the fourth.
It's the fourth.
Yes, I think so.
Going against logic, eh? So one would expect the fourth to form the inferior, then the third to form the superior, but it's not like that. The third pouch will form the inferior parathyroids. The fourth would form the superior. How does that influence our gross anatomy structure? Having inferior come from above, then superior come from below. How does that influence our structure? Because if inferior is above, that means it should migrate, eh? It should migrate to come below superior. Otherwise, there won't be superior and inferior. How does that affect structure in gross? That's when you then say the position of your inferior parathyroids is variable. Why? Because if they're going to migrate, they can end up anywhere. They can even migrate all the way down to the heart. Right? So embryology really influences how we look at the gross. One can even look at it from histology and say it influences everything. Just depends with what you're strong in. Right. So dorsal part of third pouch gives me inferior parathyroid. Dorsal part of fourth gives me superior parathyroid. Then the ventral part of the third gives me the thymus. You know the thymus, eh? Anyone know where the thymus is? Does anyone know where the thymus is? Guys, anyone know where the thymus, or at least what the thymus is, okay?
Can I try?
Yes, sure.
I don't know what it is, but I know that it produces T cells.
No. Doesn't produce, but they mature there. So all blood cells come from the bone marrow, by the way. So they're coming from the bone marrow, your immature T cells, your T lymphoblasts, but they mature in the thymus. That's why they're called T cells. Right. You get it?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you also think B cells are called B cells because they mature in the bone marrow?
No.
But yes, they mature in the bone marrow. So why do we call them B cells? Someone told
I'm
me
not
that.
sure.
Someone told me that whenever I say no to something, to a question, if you say false or something, always have something that makes your answer. They're called B cells because they mature in something called the besa of fabricus in beds. Yeah, it's just a breather for us to breathe. Okay. So ventral part of third pouch, it gives us the thymus. Then ventral part of the fourth pouch, it gives us something called ultimobranchial body. What's that? The ultimobranchial body. What do you think it is? Does anyone know what the thyroid gland does? Okay, so yeah, it's a bit hard when you really start with head and neck, but thyroid is follicular cells that produce T3 and T4 hormones. But on the other hand, on the far spectrum of it, there are C cells in the thyroid that produce what we call calcitonin. Those C cells are derived from the ultimobranchial body, meaning part of the thyroid is coming from the pouches, because the ventral part of the of the fourth pouch is giving us ultimobranchial body. Right. Okay. Then do you guys do clinicals? You do. Okay. There's something called first act syndrome. The fancy name for it is Treacher-Collins syndrome. And in Treacher-Collins syndrome, the mutation is of a gene called TRECO. Right? So you have problems with anything coming from the first act. The mandible, you have mandibular hypoplasia, you have problems with the maxilla, the zygomatic bone, the squamous part of the temporal. So it's the first act syndrome. Then there's something called the Robin sequence. Since I'm on video, I'd rather not say this, but there's a way to remember it, but it's not so good. So I'm not gonna say it. But how we remember Robin sequence, I'll try saying it in the nicest way. These people have a very small mandible. So if you have a very small mandible, we call that micrognathia. If I have a very small mandible, that means I have a very small oral cavity. So my tongue cannot fit in the oral cavity. So it's displaced posteriorly. That's what I call glossoptosis. So Robin sequence is a triad of micrognathia, glossoptosis, and they also have excuse me, they also have cleft palate. Then there's also something called Goldenhar syndrome. Goldenhar syndrome or ocular auriculovertebral defects. So they have ocular problems, they have auricular problems. For the eye, they have eye tumors and dermoids. For the ear, they have very small ears, which we call microtia, or absence of the ear, which is known as anotia. Then for the vertebral column, they have spina bifida, which I'm sure we'll talk about if we talk about the neural tube. But these people also have craniofacial malformations. Their bones are not formed well. Right. That's that for that. Questions so far? None. Okay.
No.
Then development of the tongue. The tongue arises from this pharyngeal arc as well. So the first arc gives me 3 swellings in I don't know if that is orange or what. It gives me a median tuberculum impar and 2 lateral lingual swellings. The 2 lateral lingual swellings will overlap and grow over that tuberculum impar and close, and they form the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. Meaning anterior 2/3 of the tongue originates from the first arc. So if I go to gross anatomy, sensory innervation for the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, it's the lingual nerve. Lingual nerve is a branch of mandibular nerve. Can you see the link? Mandibular nerve is the nerve of the first arc. Are you guys seeing the link?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then, of course, taste for anterior 2/3 will now come from facial nerve, but taste is a spatial sense that like how we direct the nerves for spatial senses is different. Then the second, the third, and the fourth arcs, they create something called a hypobranchial eminence or copula. It comes from the second. Can you see there's a blue component from the second, a yellow component from the third, and a green component from the fourth? That copula will form the posterior third of the tongue. But the main part of that posterior third of the tongue actually comes from the third arc. And the nerve of the third arc was glossopharyngeal. So if I go to my gross anatomy, part of the, not part actually, sensory innervation for the posterior third of the tongue is actually glossopharyngeal. Then what lies between the anterior 2/3 of the tongue and the posterior third of the tongue? There's a structure there that looks like a V. What do we call it? Tepiwa, do you want to say something?
Yes, no, circumvalid.
No. Circumvalid papillae lie in front of that V. But what do I call the V? It's called a sulcus terminalis, eh? So at the apex of that V, there's something called a foramen cecum, which I want us to see here. Between tuberculum impar and the copula, there is that foramen cecum. It marks the origin of the thyroid gland. So thyroid gland will form by what we call a thyroglossal duct. It forms from that foramen. It's actually initially attached at that foramen cecum between the tuberculum impar and the copula. And from that region, from the tongue, the thyroid will migrate now to its definitive position in the neck. Right. So there's a problem there. Thyroid is coming from the tongue, meaning it can fail to migrate. I can have my thyroid on the tongue, which is called a lingual thyroid. The word lingual means tongue. Then or on the pathway of migration, some thyroid tissue may remain there. It may reach its final destination, but some of the tissue may remain along the way. That's ectopic thyroid tissue or aberrant thyroid tissue. Then the bad one now. The thyroglossal duct, which attaches the thyroid to the base of the tongue there at the foramen cecum, it must degenerate. If it fails to degenerate, there is a problem again. I will have a thyroid that is attached to the tongue, and that duct will form a cyst. So someone presents with a median swelling, which when they swallow, it moves because it's attached to the base of the tongue. Is it making sense? Guys,
Can you repeat?
if if my thyroglossal duct does not degenerate, I remain with a midline swelling, which is the thyroglossal cyst. And this cyst is because thyroglossal duct did not degenerate between the tongue and the thyroid. It should degenerate. So this cyst, how I differentiate it from other neck swellings, how I know that the problem is with this embryological thing, ask them to swallow. They just give them a glass of water. They will swallow and that cyst will move. Why? Because it's attached to the tongue. And during deglutition, which is swallowing, the tongue moves. Right? Yeah. Anyways, not so important. But just know you can have a thyroglossal cyst and it's going to be in the midline. Unlike those branchial fistulas that I said, they're on the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid. Then where do the muscles of the tongue come from? I'd forgotten, eh? Muscles of the tongue do not come from any of these pharyngeal arcs. Because remember, all muscles of the tongue are innervated by hypoglossal nerve except the palatoglossus. So hypoglossal nerve does not belong to any pharyngeal arc. Eh? So muscles of the tongue are derived from what we call occipital somites. Right. Are we there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I've done tongue, I've done thyroid, I've done the pharyngeal arcs and the pouches and the cleft. Then on your list, there's palate as well. So palate is not hard. For palate, oh no, I haven't done nose, so I can't talk about palate. It's hard. Okay. Would you still want me to continue for tonight?
No.